So let's say you've got these Waves plugins and you really love using them. I love using all the Waves plugins that I have for different things in different situations, but it's all been for me in the studio. And up until the pandemic, had never had a chance to use them in a live situation because I didn't own a console that could, or didn't have access to, wasn't volunteering at a church, or didn't spend the money on a console that had access to that functionality. Mm-hmm. If you're not familiar with how that works, Waves makes a SoundGrid server. They call it SoundGrid is their audio format, kind of like AES or Dante, Matty, whatever. SoundGrid is their thing. It's Digico's, but they ride on that together.
Is it Digico's? I thought they just partnered with them.
No, I mean, Digico developed it with them. So, yeah, it's built off of Digico's thing.
The Windows ME.
Yeah, pretty much. That was a good pull.
I remember we had a problem with the Digico a long time ago, and that was when we realized that it was running Windows ME, and we were like, "Oh my gosh!" Like it's not even Windows 7.
They're just sitting there, just like nobody. We just hope nobody ever looks. If anybody ever peels this code open, we're gonna lose so many customers.
I mean, then that was like almost a decade ago now, so I'm pretty sure that it's built off of like Windows 7 or Windows 10 now.
Probably not. Who knows?
It's just Windows ME still. Yeah.
Tech debt, man. It's hard to eliminate. So if you're not, so you would have to basically own a console that could talk to Waves plugins over SoundGrid. You'd have to buy like a computer that acted as a server, kind of like a brain to be able to process. So all your audio would come into your desk, out to this server, right? Process audio there through the plugins, and it's kind of being the extra brain to have the horsepower to process all that stuff,
right?
Then spitting it back into the console, and it's doing it so quickly that there's no perceived latency in the audio.
Depending on who you talk to.
According to science and sound waves, 10 milliseconds you've got to play with before there's a noticeable in a live situation.
Now, isn't that's not
room size affects that, blah blah blah.
Yeah, but isn't that more the workload of each individual plugin that creates the latency?
Right, and it's workload of each plugin, what it's demanding, and then also what your CPU is able to give to it. Right. What you know.
That's the way I always understood it. Was like this plugin isn't really doing a whole bunch, so it's like the latency is
nothing.
You can't you could not audibly hear it.
Yeah.
This one is like, oh my gosh, like you're
thousands of milliseconds.
Yeah, like like the isotope repair. Like if you tried using that live, it's so heavily so intense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I've always understood it. Yep. Is that accurate, or
that's basically what latency is. Yeah, and so then plugins using them adds latency latency they're asking, they're doing things to the audio, manipulating it, right, and then sending it back in. So it's going out, being manipulated, back in.
But most plugins that you would use live are like compressors, some effects.
Traditionally, up until this point,
Okay, yeah.
In the last couple of years, though, Waves especially has really leaned into, because they introduced their own console, their own live sound desk, the LV1, which we have at DCC. We use that for broadcast. Their philosophy was let's stay kind of almost in a Windows environment, because it runs on Windows.
Yep.
So their LV1, instead of, if you think of a traditional soundboard, right, with the screen and controls and then faders on the bottom,
which has a computer built into it.
That exactly, the computer's built in there, and it's running, like you said, Windows ME, or it's running some custom. Most of them are running Linux and some custom boot of Linux that and they design their own
open source.
Right, and Midas has their own. GUI, graphical user interface, or GUI, right?
Yeah, I think
that carries across the X32 and all that stuff.
I think all the Alan Heath stuff is all Linux.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. Alan Heath is definitely Linux. And so, Waves did that. They built it on Windows, but they built it as as an app that runs inside of Windows. Mm-hmm. So you actually purchase a Windows machine, and then you purchase a SoundGrid server from them, which they've made for a long time, and they continue to improve.
Which is essentially just a rack-mounted computer.
Yeah, you're buying two rack-mount computers.
Right.
one of them is the computer where you interact with stuff, and then the other one is just the brain for the plugins to handle all of that audio in and out and the processing of everything, right? So Waves said, we want to do this. They made this, and then they put a whole bunch of time into making as many of their plugins as possible zero latency or near zero latency, like even their auto tune and some of their like real time like compressors and all kinds of crazy stuff. They're like, so as little overhead as possible so that they can be used. Or they've started to come out with like live versions of their plugins that are like maybe don't spend so long or so much power processing something so that they can have lower latency. The first one that comes to mind is like the Abbey Road's mastering chain that we use at church. That has there's when I go in to select that plugin, there's Abbey Road's mastering and then there's Abbey Road's mastering live.
Oh, okay.
F6, the EQ has that as well. There's F6 and then F6 RTA live, right? Like
now, is that using just, hey, we're going to use more horsepower to get like to eliminate some of that, or is that like we're going to actually do this a little bit differently because it's live and we don't want that latency? Right.
Yeah. It's a differently tuned algorithm, I guess you could say, basically.
Do you lose anything on that because of that?
I noticed that there are certain presets that aren't available. Okay. So it must be
because
just
they're probably
kind of
intensive.
Yeah, the kind of like compression and limiting that's going on in there or whatever, right? Might be.
Yeah, it's like when you're running like an M32 and you have 32 channels and like every single one of them has a compressor and every single one of them has an effect.
Yeah, the desk
and you just like the audio quality. You're like, oh, this is like 24 sample rate.
Exactly. Yeah, so sample rate starts to fall, whatever.
Yeah.
What was I just saying?
We were talking about Abbey Road.
Oh, yeah, and zero latency, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that they had like this server that was like the brain of everything is really what helped them on that zero latency journey and figuring it out, because they had something that could just exist next to a computer.
Yeah, let's talk about this LV1 as a live broadcast console and in like front of house.
Yeah.
Because I will say this, like when the LV1 came out, I remember going, oh, that's pretty cool. And then we had certain people that we knew that were like, yep, we're getting rid of all of our consoles. We're putting LV1s everywhere. And I was like, ooh, like they didn't have anything that was tactile. It was all touchscreen. I don't think I could do that mixing live, front of house. And there was just like something like, I understand that like they're all computers, but it's like when this computer in like, let's say the Avantas, like it's built from the ground up for that one purpose and that's it.
Yeah.
Versus like, I get that it's like a custom made version of Windows, but like it's still not.
I mean, it's literally just Windows 10.
Yeah.
And then
but it's not built from the ground up to do that one.
Exactly.
That one thing.
Exactly.
Like
it's literally Windows 10. You can still open, like when I want to buy a new plugin, I open freaking Chrome on the computer. I buy it right there. Then I open Wave Central and it's a computer. I've got to deal with the whole Microsoft Security Defender. You're out of date, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, this thing's never on the internet. I don't care. Leave me alone. And I can't turn it off. It's Windows 10. And
exactly.
So
I mean, in that scenario, and like when we got ours, that was honestly the biggest reason why I was so hesitant.
Yeah,
was just because like I didn't really have any experience with it that like made me feel comfortable in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it is a completely different way of thinking.
Yeah,
it is a completely different way of mixing. And you're right about the touchscreen thing. So we use it for broadcast,
right? Which I love. Like now that we started
using it in a broadcast sense, because I don't necessarily so much have to be where I miss the tactile thing is that I can't be looking up in the room and feel where a fader is and change between faders, because that's a lot of what I do is when I'm mixing, I don't have to.
Yeah,
I can feel where on the desk I am, like I'm reading Braille almost or something.
Totally.
Right, or playing piano. I know where I am by feel, and then grab that. Okay, these are my two kick. Here's my delay, whatever, and I just know where those are. You don't have that on a touchscreen surface, right?
Yeah.
That was the thing we didn't mention either, is that you could sit there with a keyboard and mouse and like each fader they designed it to be a touch interface. Yep. Windows does really great with multi-touch interface, like multiple, like
I have no
fingers up to 10 digits, right?
Yeah.
So ours is kind of like a laptop setup, but it's two touch displays, and that's where the whole thing runs. Just for you out there.
Maybe we can throw a picture up or something.
For you out there. Oh, there's no camera there. For you out there.
Dang it, Caleb. We were so good. Oh, how far?
I need my bell.
We got 18 minutes in.
So it's totally different, and I like now that they have partnered with some people that have made them MIDI, just USB, almost like
Yep.
a MIDI keyboard, but it's tactile
Yeah.
sliders
I like
that work within LV1.
because I like the idea of like
they're
feeling,
motorized, all that stuff,
feeling something like
right?
giving me some tension of like, so I'm not accidentally just like, whoa, oh, that's too loud.
Yep.
Like I get that those seem petty, but like those are things that like my brain immediately goes to.
Well, and it's another touch thing. I can tell as I'm dragging my finger along the desk.
Yeah.
Underneath, as I'm pushing the fader, I can tell how far I've gone,
and
or like feel the little like paint marks as my finger slides over.
And
them
though I have
the,
no qualms about the touchscreen stuff that we have for our
Right.
broadcast, it's still not an iPhone or an iPad touchscreen.
Oh yeah, and then,
and I think that's the
until
other
Apple
thing.
does something about it, it never will be.
Exactly.
Right? Like there's just to have the Apple trackpad experience the iPad experience in LV1 would be totally different.
Game changer.
Or if it were like our phones can like vibrate when we type.
Oh yeah.
If they were doing simulated like vibe, like a vibe thing where it's kind of then you get that resistance from a.
All right.
Well,
Apple and Waves, if you guys are watching and listening to this,
email us.
Get on that.
We'll take. Let's talk.
We'll take
I was
royalties.
to say let's talk.
Okay, we don't have to keep talking about
No,
that.
that's fine. So
would you deploy an LV1 for front of house for someone now?
If they were really experienced,
When you say really experienced, like
I would put one in for myself. I'd put one in for like somebody at a big church who's like been there for a while, wants to take the next step in, like maybe they're looking at an Avantis or you're looking at something, the next step up from an M32. You want to elevate your sound a little bit.
But a volunteer you train and works once a month?
Heck no.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
I think that was more so I was trying to get because like I see a lot of people that like they act like they're pros, and I'm not trying to like hate on anyone.
No, yeah.
But it's just like they're like, yeah, we totally know what we're doing. Well, it's like, well, bro, you work at a church for 3 hours a week, and that's it.
Maybe you know your room, and you know the people that play every Sunday or whatever.
And you're giving advice to everyone saying that they need to buy this, or it's like. Like we have 5 volunteers that rotate through, and they work once a month.
Yeah.
It's like. Yeah, there's certain things that might not work well, and that doesn't mean the product is bad.
Yeah, no, I meant to say that kind of when we got started was that this kind of stuff is definitely like next level up from like volunteer stuff. This is definitely like I am either like a small team and there's just a couple of us that are going to do this regularly, or I don't have like a large volunteer, but something like that. Or I just know that everybody here on my team has the time to spend, or everybody, the culture. I think you just got to pay attention to your culture.
Yeah.
If you brought that in, would you have to spend hours and hours and hours bringing everybody else up with you?
See, I think that,
or could it be just easily?
And that thing right there, think about your culture, not just you.
Right.
Because like, again, even like, let's say that you are skilled enough to do it, but the 5 volunteers that you have aren't, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Or unless you've got the time and they have the time to put it in to be able to do it, but you don't know that.
But I feel I feel like that's a pretty rare
exactly.
occasion.
Oh, yeah, so rare. So rare. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good point. This is definitely not this is advanced. This is some like 200 level class and stuff for sure.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. Yeah, we can stop talking about that. I just, that was one of those things that I know I see.
No, that's a great question. Like, it is a really cool tool. It's a really cool way to do mixing. It's a different approach. Yeah. It is I think what it is it's a bunch of studio guys wanted to try live. And it's that kind of thinking. It's taking the studio. Taking the studio into the stadium, right? And that kind of thought process is the way that I see them approaching that.
Was it that, or was it because Waves on consoles have been around for a while,
right?
They were on, they coming to like the X32, like they weren't on the QUs, they weren't on. I don't think you could get one for like some of the lower end Soundcraft stuff,
right?
So like that older stuff you couldn't get them on, but like you could get them on Digicos, you could get them on I think iLives for sure. The newer Alan Heath stuff you can get it on. The X32 was a game changer because you had that, but it's like,
but it was still you had to buy a card, to put in the M32, and then you had to buy a Wave Sound Grid server, and it was
Right,
like
and it was like
thousands of dollars.
well, it was like a
and
Band-Aid.
yeah,
You know, and so like you have a company that's like, well, everyone's using our stuff. Why don't we just go into the hardware game
exactly.
too?
Yep.
You know, so not necessarily that's like a bunch of like studio guys were like, well,
Yeah.
I want to deal with this.
Well, no,
like,
no,
over
no, not
here.
so. It wasn't so much just like a bunch of studio guys that were like, "Oh, I want to do this live." It was them saying, "Hey, everybody uses our stuff live, but we're a studio sound company.
Right.
This is our approach to a console." Basically, is what it was. You know, and I just see it as like it's the result of a bunch of studio guys saying we're going to make a console.
Okay, that makes
basically,
sense. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, totally.
This is what happened. It's
Cool.
just kind of like there would be, you know, if Apple decided they made it when they wanted to make a console, it would probably look wildly different than anything else in the market, right?
Yeah.
And why Allen and Heat Savantis look so wildly different from the M32 or whatever, right? So just that was their design philosophy, I guess, is a good way to put it.
Yeah, totally.